Today's the big day. We're finally going to get the engine installed in the Ram. We got the 5.7 Hemi Eagle motor here, 2011 Ram 2500. Got the engine on the hoist right here. We're going to go ahead and just lift it up. I got one of my buddies here. He's going to help me get everything lined up here. Before I install the engine, what I like to do is make sure everything is ready to go with the engine. The flex plate, bolts, everything is torqued up nice, and everything in the engine bay here. The torque converter is in place. Torque converter, it's got an O-ring on this one. I just replaced that. Make sure it's not going to leak with the wiring harness. I usually clean all the grounds up, grease everything up nicely. The alignment pin, dowel pins, I grease those up. Just make sure, go over everything, make sure everything's in order for the install. Hoisting the engine up. Once we get up high enough to clear the radiator here, we're going to move forward. Just slowly inch it backwards till we get it just enough so we can work it in the engine bay here to match it up to the bell housing there. We're almost got it here, enough clearance here. At this point, we're just going to move it back slowly and then drop it in the engine bay. At this point here, we're just going to drop it very slowly, carefully, and hopefully we have enough clearance on the valve covers and all that and the heads when we drop it down in here. Alright, this is where it gets a little tricky here with the engine. We're getting close to the firewall here, over here on the radiator here. So what we're gonna have to do is angle it down as we drop it in, angle it down, drop it in as we go back, and then flatten it up once we get down here. We'll see what we can happen. We're gonna give this a shot, see if we can get the engine in coming down then this way versus straight in like we were earlier. We got to be able to clear the firewall here on the cowling here and the radiator here. I can remove the radiator if I wanted, but I want to see if I can just get it in place like this and the way it is. So we'll slowly work it in, move it down, and once we get it down and clear the valve covers here at the top and the cowling here on the firewall, we're gonna see if we can rotate it this way down in place because it opens up right here on the firewall, so we'll get more space in there. So with a little bit of finessing here, the way I had it like this as we were dropping it down in gave us just enough clearance to drop it down like this slowly to clear the cowling here, and it was pretty close on the radiator here. So, and then once we get the engine down to a certain point, as we were coming down, we rotated it to slowly rotate it back straight this way. So that actually worked. So at this point, all we have to do is line up the engine to the bell housing on the transmission, line up the dowel pins, and on each side, this side and the passenger side, the engine mount. The engine mount here, we just got to set it up on the frame here. All right, today's a new day. Last night we were working on putting this engine in the engine bay here. Not gonna lie, it was a little bit of a struggle. Initially I thought I could just go straight in and lower the back end of the engine and just lower it in like this and go straight in, but it's never that easy, of course. So what we had to do is, because the space between the radiator and the cowling there, if you would have went straight in like this, was gonna be too tight. So what we had to do is turn the engine in this way, drop it down in slowly, and then twist it back into place. Another struggle was with my engine hoist and how far the engine sits back and where the cowling is right here. My engine hoist would come to this point where the chain was hooked up to the engine, which is what was about right here, and I needed about 2-3 or more inches on the backside to mate to the bell housing. But my engine hoist was getting pretty close right here, and the chain would hit right here. So we had to drop it down, readjust the chain a few times to get it to have enough slack to move it backwards and to fit it on the bell housing transmission back there. And all we have to do now is tighten up the engine mounts, the transmission bolts, all that stuff, and then start assembling everything else back together. There's 4 flex plate to torque converter bolts. Use blue Loctite and 35 foot-pounds. To get to the next bolt, we're going to rotate the motor from the crank up here in the front. Till the next bolt comes in view. Alright, I got all the transmission to engine bolts torqued up there on the bell housing. The flex plate to torque converter, routing the wiring harness throughout on both sides, in the back, in the plugs here, and then just down below on both sides of the block. All the wiring harnesses underneath on both sides, everywhere, has to go in a specific route. Getting ready to install the exhaust manifolds. These are just the factory manifolds. I just painted them with some high temp paint. Just gonna go real quick over the bolts. Each side will have a few of these with the stud on the back here. The bolts with the threads on the back of the nut. Those are for the heat shields, the 4 corners. The bigger ones will go here. The small ones are going to be a 10 millimeter. The bolt head on these guys here are 13 millimeter. And then on the back side, the 2 that bolt to the exhaust pipes, those guys there are 14 millimeter. The stock factory nuts for these bolts, they put these dumb flimsy little things here, paper thin. They should have made them at least an 1/8 thick. They pretty much just sit in there, so when you tighten them, the nut doesn't spin. It's supposed to hold that on the edge on that manifold right there. When I originally removed, a few of the studs on the manifolds were broken, and I had to drill and extract the bolts in the heads. These are some aftermarket bolts I got that I needed a few extras. Got the exhaust manifolds bolted up. It was a little bit of a struggle to hold the exhaust manifold and the exhaust pipe. The exhaust pipe wants to pull down because it's kind of heavy. So I got everything lined up and tight. This is the passenger side. This is the driver's side. It's all bolted up. Got the AC compressor bolted up. The power steering here, I'm just about to bolt it up. When you're putting the AC compressor through, make sure the wiring harness has to be on the front forward side of these AC lines so it routes nicely in there. AC compressor has 3 bolts, one here, one there, and one on the back side, 13 millimeter. The power steering pump has 3 bolts. You just got to go through these holes there. The bolts are 13 millimeter. Before we install the alternator on the bracket, the bolt for the alternator, thread it in a little bit, nut right here on the back side, and it slides forward and backwards. So when you tighten the bolt, it pulls that forward, and when you go to take it off to remove the alternator, this little thing right here pulls too far that way, so it makes it difficult to install it on the bracket on the engine. So get a hammer, put the bolt in there, and tap it that way so that slides that way, so you leave a bigger gap right here so you can slide it on the bracket. This is what I'm talking about. So when you slide the alternator over the bracket, if that pin in the back sits too far forward, you can't slide it on very easy. So that's why you tap that back. Before I put the alternator and the intake plenum on, fan shroud and the fan and all that stuff here, I'm gonna prime the motor by just cranking the motor over without starting the engine. I want to prime the motor to make sure everything's okay. Oil I'm using for the break-in for this Hemi is this guy here. They're about 35 bucks or so for 5 quarts on Amazon. I got one side valve cover off, so what I'm checking for to make sure the upper rocker arms are getting the oil, making sure the oil is being distributed through the motor, through the oil galleys, all the way to the rockers. I'll show you here when I crank the motor over, and I have the spark plugs out as well, so the engine spins over more freely, no compression going through. And I also have the battery on charge while I'm cranking it over, because you have to crank it over multiple times to finally get the oil to pressurize to the system to come up to the top end, if you don't do the manual priming through the ports right there. So I'll show you here, oil dripping. I got oil finally coming through. You can see the oil dripping on the bottom there. And once you do this, you can deem it okay. It's got enough pressure on the top end. You can take both of the valve cover sides off. I'm just gonna do this one. Put the valve cover on, put the intake plenum, everything else back together. Installing the alternator. Got the serpentine belt installed to loosen up the tensioner to give it slack. You put a 3/8 ratchet right in there and pull up on it. Installing the fan clutch, it's left-hand threads. When you set it on the water pump, the big nut there, rotate it to the left and you'll see it tighten up. Clockwise to loosen it and counterclockwise to tighten it. And then when we get it close, we'll just get a big wrench, adjustable wrench, pop it on there and give it a couple whacks to get it tight. Next we got the fan shroud and the electric fan here. The fan goes inside here and they both get worked down simultaneously, and they sit down on these little tabs on the bottom and on the top on both sides. And then we have the retaining bolts right there and one on this side here to tighten it all up. So this is how it's supposed to sit. The electric fan sits, the radiator's right here, electric fan and the shroud. And on the edges on both sides, you just line up both these little tabs, and at the top as well on all 4 sides. The fan shroud and the electric fan is installed. There's 2 13mm bolts, one on each side, one right there, and then one is on the other side. And that's the electrical connector right there. Next we'll install the intake plenum right here. Got the intake plenum over here. Your throttle body bolts up right there. That's your PCV valve. This is your oil fill neck here. Got your brake booster line right here. This port here is where the main fuel line connects right here. Then you'll have your injectors on each side, 4 on this side, 4 on the other side. Then we got our map sensor and runner actuator valve here on the back. That's the connector right there. So when we install it, we'll connect these to this connector first, because it's on the back side by the firewall. This is the intake plenum upside down. We have all 4 gaskets on each side, and you can see the injectors right there. And make sure you put these gaskets as well right here on this side. That's for the oil fill neck here. That's how you get oil in your engine. and there's one on this side here, so make sure you guys put all those in. Get ready to install the intake manifold. I'm sitting in the engine bay here. Those are the two plugs back there right in the middle. These guys here that connect in the back of the plenum. So what I usually do is set the plenum in here sideways, and I'll connect them first, and this goes on the stud, this little piece here, and you hold the wire right there, and then I'll just, once it's connected, I'll drop the intake plenum in place right here. And there's going to be 10 8mm bolts. If you have the VVT, make sure to connect the solenoid before you put the plenum on. This is the wire harness here. This is the little dampener, whatever you call this thing here. And the wire just routes underneath that, and it connects to the connector on the side there. This is a non-MDS. Got the intake manifold bolted up. Tightened all the 10 8mm bolts all the way around. It is plastic. Don't over tighten them. I just like to use a 1/4-inch ratchet when I tighten smaller bolts, nuts. I got the cable to the alternator on, the nut, 13mm nut. Most of the wires, connectors on these Dodge motors, red safety retaining clip plugs, where you have to slide this outwards, the red tab here, in order to push the tab, the release tab right here. So whenever you connect it, so we connect it here, usually you'll hear a click, and then you just push the tab down, and that locks it in place. The fuel line here, there's usually 1 or 2 O-rings in there, and if it sits for a while, there's no fuel or lubrication on it. So I like to put just a little bit of a WD-40 right here, or spray it in there just a little bit to get those O-rings wet when you slide it on here. And you should hear it click, and when you pull it, it shouldn't come out. There's a retaining clip that you slide. And then I'll put the throttle body on and go from there. Just like that. This side is a little wider than this side here on the pipe there. So make sure you put the wider side on this side here. Next day, continue working on the engine here. It's pouring outside. I got my makeshift shelter here. Got a tarp over the hood. I just want to be able to get this done as soon as possible. So working on installing the throttle body here. There's 4 8mm bolts, screws right here. And then we got this bracket that sits right over here that holds the AC lines together. We'll install that after the throttle body. And we have the gasket already on right here. Real quick on the throttle body, there's these 2 alignment pins right here. Those go in those tiny little holes right there. So that's how you line that throttle body up. And then we just got to route the wiring here. This part of the wiring harness connects to the sensor here on the water pump, and then it comes down underneath right through here. There's 2 plastic retaining clips that just go in the little metal bracket there, and then it just comes up through here for the throttle body, and this one here goes to the intake. Installing the upper radiator hose, connecting to the thermostat housing right there in the radiator here. What I do is I put a little bit of coolant on the radiator hose, so when I slip it on there, it's nice and lubricated. This one here will tell you this is for the radiator side, and that's the engine side right there. See the marks on the radiator hose? I put the clamp exactly back where it was from when I took it off, because that helps it seal better. I got almost everything back together, just the intake box. So this is the coolant I have decided to buy for this Ram 2500. It's the Prestone Platinum one. It's 15 plus years, 350,000 miles. What I do is I take a gallon of this distilled water and the concentrate of that, and this way you get bang for your buck, and you just mix these up 50-50. So half water, distilled water, and half coolant. And then over here at the truck here, this is your coolant reservoir overflow bottle here. I got that filled to the max. This is my spill-free funnel. It's just a Lyle 24680. That's how you connect it there with that fitting there. And you just keep filling it with coolant, and the air will start working its way out of the system. As the coolant's going in, the air's coming out. Once we get the truck running, more air is going to come out as the water pump spins and pushes the fluid through the system. And with the heater in the hot position on the fan off or low, at the very low position there, and air will start working its way out. And you keep doing that you can rev up the engine however you want to do it, to bleed the whole system out of air. You don't want any air trapped in there. On the back of the container, it'll tell you the compatibility, all the vehicles that it'll work for, the type that each vehicle may take, what kind of coolant. And this one specifically, the Ram, is supposed to take HOT or OAT. But Prestone is pretty much just a general, it supposedly works with all vehicles. Alright, got everything hooked up. I got the intake box on, the sensor here, the coils connected, injectors, intake box. The battery's on charge because I'm going to be cranking it a little more. Fuel pump disconnected, so we can get the oil priming through the system a little more before I go do the initial start. I'm inside the truck. I'm going to go ahead and just clear the codes just to make sure there's nothing in the system when I do an initial start. And as you can see, I have 8 present right now because I was cranking it earlier with the sensors unplugged. So we'll go ahead and clear them and go from there. I cleared them. These are the 8 permanents. They should go away as the engine is running, and cross our fingers and they disappear. Alright, while we're cranking the motor over to prime the engine, we have the fuel pump fuse disconnected, which is going to be, in this case, in the fuse panel here by the battery. It's going to be M25, which is going to be this one, yellow one right here, a 20 amp fuse here. And then before we go ahead and start it, just make sure you put the fuse back in for the fuel pump to prime, and so you can go ahead and start the car. Alright, the moment we've been all waiting for. The first startup. What we're doing is checking for leaks. Alright, it's the next day after I got the engine running. I've only driven it 2.3 miles. I went to go to the gas station to put some fresh gas in the tank. This is cold oil pressure on startup. So you have the digital right here, and then you have the gauge right here on the side as well. This is with the Melling high volume oil pump. I also got the scanner hooked up so I can just check the codes, see what we got here. We got one pending PO420, of course. Let's see what the other two are. Still a permanent from the previous history. Cylinders have a misfire. This was from the originally when they had the cam lifter failure. It should clear up. Hopefully the PO420 is not going to be the cat. Hopefully it's just an O2 sensor. We'll see. I got to look further into that. Engine is warmed up, 700 RPM on the idle. We're sitting at about 55 PSI on the oil pressure. I'll rev it up to 2,000 RPM, 2,500, see where it goes.